Hello, welcome to the last episode of the podcast Forensic Things. So, with this being the last, podcast episode, we're gonna do the usual and just talk about which module stood out to me the most. A past case and a more recent case. So, I think for me, the module that I want to talk about or reflect on is Module 6. Now, this module had to do with the interpretation of fingerprints. Now, in forensics, using fingerprints is very, very crucial and very important because it puts you in the system. So, with using fingerprints, it actually helps these investigators to link, different crime scenes together, or if they involve the same person. And so it helps them to track any sort of criminal records, such as like any of their previous arrests, convictions, if they were in sentencing, probation, parole, all that kind of stuff. And so it's very interesting that there's this whole system that can pull up that information, and really it tells you a lot about what a person has on their record or part of their history. So a case that used fingerprints or palm prints or whatever to really help determine it was the case of Richard Allen Davis in 1996. So, he was actually convicted of murder and sentenced to death. So, in 1993, Polly Klaas, age 12, was actually kidnapped from her home in Petaluma, California. So Richard Allen Davis actually appeared at her window with a knife and had abducted her. And so what the FBI found that really linked him to this case was that they found his palm prints actually on the bunk bed using, like the special light and the fluorescent powder or whatnot. And also, they had also found a car in a ditch that actually had like torn children's like clothing, and so they were able to match those two palm prints together and identify that it was actually Richard Allen Davis who murdered this 12-year-old little girl. And also about the module that was included, or like assignment that was included in Module 6, another assignment that was done or that we learned was remembering our memory for different features like on a person's face. And obviously, if a person is able to identify another person, knowing their characteristics and can link them to whatever crime it is very useful to have a witness. And so after reading a little bit more into this case, it was identified that there was at least one witness for this Richard Allen Davis case that he was identified as the knife welding man who abducted Polly the night of October 1st in 1993. It was actually she was actually kidnapped from a slumber party, and so that is where a witness saw Davis outside of the window. And yeah, I mean, those two really did go hand in hand to figure out who took Polly Klaas and who murdered her. So it just shows how important it is to remember small details about a person, that anyone you encounter, because it could be very useful, such as, this is an example where one witness was able to help identify it, and how using fingerprints, especially now that technology is, evolving every day, and it's being quicker and whatnot, it's a quicker way to be able to link different people, since all of us have different characteristics to our fingerprints. No person has the same fingerprint set, or even like our palm prints or anything. So yeah, and so I think a most recent case that I'm going to talk about that I did find, it is actually a 16-year-old case. So it wasn't really solved until last year. So this case, basically, with technology evolving, they finally arrested a suspect that was wanted in the murder of a woman in 2005. So this case was it was still open and never really solved, not until recently. And so they had arrested 56-year-old Charles Wright on suspicion of murdering 21-year-old Pertina Epps using strangulation. Her body was actually found in an empty parking stall on April 26, 2005, around 1 p.m., when a Gardena resident was backing out of a carport on 141 First Street. At the time, so this is what Deputy Alejandra Parra said, who was part of the Sheriff's Information Bureau. At the time of the murder, an extensive investigation was conducted by LASD homicide detectives, and all leads were exhausted, said Ms. Parra. During a review of this case in 2021 by the Sheriff's Homicide Unsolved Unit, forensic evidence left at the crime scene was resubmitted for examination using current technology. DNA and fingerprint evidence was determined to belong to the suspect, Charles Wright, Parra concluded. So Wright made bail that was set at $1 million the same day that he was arrested, and he was scheduled to appear in court for on June 28th. And so they did more investigating, and he was actually linked to another case, which I found. He was linked to another crime in 2006 of sexual assault of an 18-year-old woman in Los Angeles. He is now, or he was arrested again at the end of June, I want to say in 2022, and he is now being held without bail and has been charged in both cases. Both Epps and the woman Wright was accused of sexually assaulting were known prostitutes, and investigators say they believe Wright may have committed other crimes. So what investigators are saying, they are basically saying at this point they have a high suspicion that there might be other prostitutes that were victimized by Charles Wright. And so it was stated that he had worked as a middle school teacher for the past 20 odd years and was still working as a teacher for the Inglewood Unified School District at the time of his arrest. So this is another good example of an older case that was not solved, and now using today's technology and the case being reopened or the evidence being resubmitted to check for further investigation just shows how they were able to give an answer, an answer to the first case. They figured out another case that he was accused of sexual assault of an 18-year-old, and now, with more, now that his fingerprints are in the system and now they're collecting it, they are now accusing him of more crimes, which is interesting and to see, because more of these cases become solved and an answer starts to arise rather than leaving it closed and just completely, like, you know, being a cold case, being very, having no answer, no face to put to the crime. So it's important to learn more about these fingerprints, evolve with the technology, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So that is the end of this podcast, and I hope y'all enjoyed your semester. Bye.